And now we're live. Everybody, welcome to the End Goal Podcast, the show where I like to have meaningful conversations with people on topics I find interesting or educative. I've been on a bit of a run because I've had the opportunity to talk to two of my favorite authors within the same week. And so today we're with Phillip C. Quaintrell, or PC Quaintrell, if you've seen him on his books or his socials. Phillip, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, so to give people a little bit of background, I found your book in 2024, which was by accident. And I think that's the best part. So in 2024, I was going through a bit of I want to read like Ranger books again because I grew up on Ranger's Apprentice, and that's one of my favorite series of all time.
Okay, yeah.
Um, and I love the Ranger class; it's like my favorite class ever. So in 2023, I had read a couple of like Amazon samples of some books, and I read one of them was a Ranger book. And in 2024, I couldn't remember which one that was, and I was too lazy to go back and remember. So I just typed into Google or into Amazon. I was like Rangers or whatever it is, and I saw Rise's Ranger. I was like, I'm pretty sure it was this one. This looks similar. It was Pedro Urbi's The Traitor's Son, by the way. The book covers look nothing alike. They look nothing alike. The stories are nothing alike.
Great accident.
And so I came across this one, and as I was reading it, I was like, I never read this book in my life, but I finished book one, or I was getting through book one, and I finished book one, and I was like, I need to keep going. And this was in August, around the time that I had like nose surgery, and I was just very just like at home doing nothing,
Yeah.
and I just needed to read books. So I read this series, and for the time that this was around the time when I was on Twitter. If you go back in time to August and September of 2024, you would see a lot of all caps tweets from the Entro Archives account directed towards Mr. Quaintrell, because he kept putting stuff in this book that I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I finished the 9 books within like a month, 2 months, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Because they're just so good to get. They're massive, guys. I'm gonna like try and get out of the way to show people. They're
There they are.
massive books, guys. They're massive, massive books. And so I want to start there. Why did you write these books?
It was initially my love letter to the genre. I didn't grow up on like fantasy, I suppose. I think I mostly grew up on sci-fi. But then Lord of the Rings came out when I was, 12, 13. The Peter Jackson films, and they just took me and they pulled me away from sci-fi and they thrust me into the world of fantasy. And it always stuck with me. That Ranger, you said you loved the Ranger, the Ranger character. I loved all of that. And I wasn't really finding it either. When I was looking for books, the closest I got was R.A. Salvatore's Homeland, the Dritz, the Legend of Dritz story.
Yes.
Those really pulled me in, and I was like, this is, fantasy for the modern reader. This is exactly what I was looking for. And at the time when I started writing Rise of the Ranger, I was already writing a sci-fi series, my first set of books, which is the Terran Cycle. I wrote those first, and I was partway through them. And I just needed to pivot just for a little time. I just wanted to just write something completely different for just a minute, just to keep everything, keep all the wheels greased, that kind of thing. And I said to my wife, I was like, I might write a fantasy book, just one, because obviously I'm a sci-fi guy. I'll write one fantasy book, and that will be my, that's what I'll give to the genre, and then just walk away.
I'll take one hit and then I'll stop. Like, it's fine.
Yeah,
I'll just it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. And I wrote that one book, and as you know from reading it, it didn't end. There is no ending at Rise of the Ranger. It has its ending for the book, but there is no conclusion. And that really spiraled out of control.
Yeah. I bet.
It became a trilogy, which made sense in my head. I was like, Lord of the Rings, trilogy. Trilogies are great. Everyone likes things in threes. And then as I was getting through book 3, I started to just see I think that's one of the things that happens when you are writing a book is you're one part of your brain is right here in the moment, writing the scene by scene, the present day story, but another part of your brain is always jumping ahead and unraveling what might be, what are the different avenues, what more is there to come. And even though when you get to the end of a series, um, you might ignore some of that because you're like, no, this is
Mm-hmm.
the end. This is the end. I couldn't ignore that when I was writing book three. There was
Mm.
just too much coming to me and saying, oh, but what if? What if? What if there was another generation, and what if these immortal characters moved into the next one, and there was the new generation with the immortal ones, and then I wrote a paragraph that outlined the next three books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I guess I was just looking really far ahead because at the same time I then saw how that would feed another trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with this single thread moving all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I really just committed to it. And
Yeah.
that, at the end of the day, that was what it took to do nine books, was just committing to it and convincing myself I wasn't writing nine books. I was just
Mm.
writing three books at a time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think I might have been a bit daunted by the fact that I was still years away from completing this story that I had
Right.
stuck in my head.
Right. I
Um,
mean, segmenting the whole task at hand to make it a little bit more digestible definitely makes sense, given that like you're not writing a 9 book episodic thing where each book is self-contained, right? You're writing like a
mm.
9 book epic. And so there's always things to be like, I have to put these little kernels here so that in 4 books down the line, the you see the seeds sprout, or
Well,
what
that's the
happened
thing. I
things.
didn't. I didn't do that. That's my
Mm,
problem. I don't plan. The planning I did was a single paragraph
mm,
that that was just three or four lines that just said these three characters would be the sons and daughters of X, Y, and Z,
yeah.
um, and the problem would be the orcs. The orcs
Mm,
will come and they'll be the problem. And then
mm,
I was like, and then the next three books, it wouldn't. It would be, um, this person is now the bad guy,
yeah.
and this is what he's going to bring with him, and that'll
Mm,
be the. There was no detail at all in my
I
plan.
see.
Some of the problems I solved in book nine, the solutions were way back in book three,
Mm,
2, 4, but I didn't plan on that. The
mm,
characters just because the characters had lived it, they
mm,
they solved it through their own experiences, which
yeah.
I can tell you as the writer makes life really easy.
Well, that's a really interesting thing that a lot of writers say, where it's like, I didn't want it to happen, but that's what the character was. That's what the character does. Like that's what their story goes a lot of the time, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why, like, how do you notice those moments where you're like, this is gonna be tough. I'm gonna have to write this, but this is what the character is going to do. Like if I didn't write this is what they would do anyway. So I have to write it. Like
Yeah.
how do you go through those moments? Because there's some pretty tough moments in book one all the way through book nine. There are some tough moments, and reading it, I was like, this is tough. This is tough. Like I'm thinking back to book nine. I'm about to start crying again.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
I'm thinking of the same thing.
yeah, and I probably yelled and tweeted it at you anyway that I was like, okay, I'm welling up. One sec, guys. Okay, so how do you um how did you manage writing those tough moments?
Um, well, first of all, are we doing spoilers? Is this a spoilery thing?
I mean, your book has been out for a while.
Great. So, obviously, in book nine, and I think you're probably talking about Athis.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, I wasn't even talking about. I was talking about homeboy, uh, oldest son of Nathaniel. I'm blanking on his name, but his sacrifice.
Uh, what? Yeah, Elijah,
Elijah's sacrifice. Like that's the one that hit me more than anything.
right?
Um, Probably the
Yeah.
biggest hit was that
Oh,
to
really?
me
Okay, because
personally
most of
because
the
I loved
feedback,
his character. I absolutely like Vigon was my
really,
okay. Is it Vigon? Vigon? How do you pronounce it?
I always say Vigon.
Vigon. Okay, so Vigon's character was actually like my personal like. This guy's so badass. He's so
Yeah.
cool. He's so steadfast. He's my steadfast guy, right? And I
Salt the
loved his
earth.
image in my head. But after I finished the series, I was like, man, I absolutely loved Elijah's storyline and his arc. And
He
like,
had a great arc. Yeah.
The way it ended, I was like, it made me so mad because that's the way it should have ended. Like, there's no way for it to end, and like, even if I wanted to hope for it to end to where it didn't happen, that was going to happen. And so when I
Yeah.
thought back on it, I was like, there's only two, maybe three characters in books that have ever made me like tear up. One was Elijah at the end of Echo Saga. One was the main character in the Drowning Empire series, and one was the male main character in the Rosario Mundus Fireborn series. All three of those like men and how their like story ended,
Yeah.
because it felt a bit tragic at the end. I was like, wow, it hits. And so
Mm.
I always think like, man, what must writers be going through while they're writing out these scenes, right? Because
Yeah. I
are you
mean,
more?
that
Do you see
it's
yourself more as like an architect, or more of like kind of like an empathetic, like I'm with the characters doing these things with them.
no, when I'm writing them, it's like I am the character, so it's
Mm,
very emotional writing it. Because you are the only way I can come up with their responses, emotional, physical, is by kind of like inhabiting them.
mm-hmm.
So it is very emotional, and depending on what I'm going through in my life, can
Yeah.
also affect how I'll react at the time.
Mm,
Um, and more often than not, I'm just like the reader. I don't want these characters to die. I want them
mm,
to survive. I want them to be redeemed. I want them to figure
mm,
their shit out.
yeah.
And sometimes in the case of Athis, I wrote a version where he survived,
Really.
and my editor went, "Nah, shit."
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I sent them both. Um, the caveat being that the one where he survived, I think I'd just been indulgent and wrote it because I wanted a version where he lived.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was aware that the victory came at no cost
Right.
without that. There was no price to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have just hammered the enemy and won, and it just
Yeah.
felt like it wasn't quite earned at the end.
Yeah.
So I stuck with the original version, which the one you read. And yeah, in the case of Elijah, I wanted him to survive. I wanted him to get that redemption. I wanted him to have a moment with his parents one last time, with his
Mm-hmm.
sister. Um, but then, like I say, you're always thinking ahead, and you think ahead to that character. What life would he have had uh, post redemption? The
Yeah.
entire realm would have chopped his head off the first chance they get. He
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have lived anywhere.
Yeah.
He would have
Like
been a
he would have had
wanted
to go
man.
across the ocean to the other isle like area
Ada, yeah, he
land,
couldn't.
and
He
like
couldn't
live
have
in
gone
exile, live in
to.
like hiding,
Yeah,
or like a new completely new identity. He would
yeah,
no longer be Elijah or allowed to be
yeah,
Elijah.
yeah,
And it was like, and it's a very interesting comparison between him and um my boy, my brain is so Asher, sorry. Kind of interesting dichotomy between him and Asher. Asher having like been with the assassins for so long and done the work he did there, and then the story of him redeeming himself. And you're thinking like, that almost that worked because of the foil of all the different villains, all the different like Elijah and all that stuff, like allowed him to be redeemed in a sense. Like he left,
yeah,
he's working really hard to make the realm a better place, but like there may not ever be that moment for Elijah to be like, I'm back, guys. Listen, I know we have a new doom and gloom guy, and I'm back to help out. Like, let me help the realm, let me redeem myself. I don't think there's like there could have been like a maybe there was another like realm threat to where if Elijah had lived, gone into exile, come back. Sometimes you love those
yeah,
stories of like this guy's he was so
yeah,
strong and he went into exile and he's like the overpowered guy and he comes back to
yeah.
help out. But I'm like, yeah, that's just like my indulgent, like my hope for the character. But I think the only way he did what could have been redeemed is doing exactly what he did at the end. And I'm like, that's the only way that like
Yeah, because he would also have had to have lived with all that shame and guilt of,
mm-hmm,
all the stuff that he caused. And even though he might have been able to have explained it away with how Maliath was
mm-hmm,
really controlling the way he felt about
yeah,
things and thought about things, it still would have eaten away at him. Whereas, Asher, you've not read the Ranger Archives, I know,
not
but like,
yet,
trigger warning, in those books, he does deal with suicide. Like that's a
mm-hmm,
thing that he wrestles with. And
Mm-hmm.
you, when you read those books, you'll understand why he goes through that, and the things that he did that make him feel in the same way that Elijah did right at the very end. And then
Mm-hmm.
you'll see the things that help him, the things that intervened, and the things that help him get through it. And then, of course, the big difference is that he has Evangeliel, who draws a
Yeah.
line under it all and says, "We're beginning again."
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
whereas, unfortunately, Elijah got Goliath,
Mm-hmm.
and I know again you've not read A Time of Dragons, right? But A Time of Dragons is Goliath's origin story.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I actually wanted to ask you what caused you to after these. Oh, I guess explain to me if the prequel the prequel type of series of like of the before the age of Echo Saga, did you write those during the nine or did you write them like after the nine? In terms of like thinking about the stories and wanting to write them, or like how why did you decide to stay in the world and make the stories of like Asher's story of the reign of in with his time with the assassins
yeah.
and then Time of Dragons even further back of like Malai's origin story and some of the people that were alluded to in Echo Saga, like them all the way back.
Yeah, I mean, I started planning out A Time of Dragons as far back as Age of the King, so book six.
Okay.
Um, I started, and you know, yeah, you if you were to read A Time of Dragons now and then go back and reread the Echo Saga, you'll see the little tidbits that I've dropped
Mm-hmm.
in like six, seven, eight, and nine
Mm-hmm.
that will hark back to what you now read in A Time of Dragons because they're all
Right.
connected. They don't spoil each other, but they are all interconnected. They're all part
Mm-hmm.
of the same tapestry. Um, and I guess the reason I've gone back rather than continuing on is because, I mean, one, as I was finishing A Clash of Fates, book nine, my daughter was born,
Mm-hmm.
and she was my second child, and I knew from my first one that that first year is a lot, and you know, two kids, there was just a lot going on at the time, you know, and I thought to myself, I need to figure out again now how do I move on and write the next book with this new baby in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was just getting emails after emails and messages on social media of people just being like, "We want more Asher. Give us more Asher.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next Asher story? Please, please,
That's
please, more
fair.
Asher."
I do
And
also want more Asher, so I was like,
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah, everyone wanted more Asher, and I was like, okay, well, I'm in a situation where I'm tired a lot. You know, I've got a
Mm-hmm.
new baby in my life. I've got two kids now, not one. I need to figure out what I'm going to do here. People want Asher, and I'm so frazzled that I'm not entirely sure I can deliver another epic saga that takes 10 characters in 10 different locations doing 10 different
Mm-hmm.
things and then weaving them all together into one big storyline. But what I can do is give the people what they want, and that's more Asher.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought maybe what I could do is go back and give us his origin story of how,
Mm-hmm.
and let's start with him as an assassin. Let's actually see Asher working in Nightfall and doing all of the things that we knew he did in his past, and then see him move through to being a ranger, and then you know meeting Doran, meeting Russell, and
Yeah.
just some of those stories because you know they're single POV for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
um, which was you know in my head at the time I was like that would be much easier. I can figure out a sort of 350 400 page
Mm-hmm.
book with a single POV that's Asher because I was like I just knew Asher. I could write
Yeah.
him you know with my eyes closed kind of thing. He's always like a second skin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I started writing. You know, I did most of Court of Assassins and the back half of Clash of Fates with my daughter on my chest, you know, in a sling,
That's
trying to
cool.
keep her asleep while I was writing.
It's pretty badass for
Um,
an author. I'm not gonna lie to you.
it was a really great time because you know she'd sleep like 10 hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
and I stood at the breakfast bar in my kitchen just writing, and no one could disturb me because I was keeping the baby asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great. Like
She's
every
your
day,
insurance, really. So
yeah, it
she's
was
your
great.
armor.
Yeah, my son would come, you know, running at me, and my wife would, you know, intercept because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, baby's asleep. You gotta leave me alone. You gotta leave me alone.
Yeah,
I've got to
yeah.
get. So I got loads of writing done, um, and because she slept really well, and was just generally quite easy as a baby, I soon found myself being like, oh, do you know what? Actually, I wonder if I could write a big epic that sprawls across the realm and brings in lots of
Mm-hmm.
different characters and all that kind of. I mean, I started to think maybe I could start writing a Time of Dragons because
Mm-hmm.
I've been planning that, in halfway through the
Yeah.
Echo Saga. And so the Ranger Archives was actually 4 books, and I took it down to 3
Mm-hmm.
because I think halfway through Blood and Coin, the second one, um, I was really, really jonesing for that complicated
Yeah. Yeah.
weaving of storylines. I was like, that's all I had written so far was that kind of story, and actually
Mm-hmm.
going, grounding myself in this simpler story with a single POV, it just felt. It felt like it wasn't enough. I needed more characters and I needed big world ending problems, not like the monster problems that he deals with in the Ranger Archives.
Mm-hmm.
The Ranger Archives is more like what you'd expect of like The Witcher if he ever did
Yeah.
any actual witchering, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like where he just deals with the monsters. He doesn't get embroiled in all these big things. Um, and so I took it from 4 books to 3 books, and that meant I was able to start a Time of Dragons sooner than I
Mm-hmm.
intended to. And then yeah, once I dived into that, I mean, I'm still there now. I'm writing book 4 of 5 right now.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get that out this summer. Tides of Blood and War.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about it, and it's one of these stories as well that's given me, because I've gone back, I can do the origins of the Dragon Riders.
Yeah.
I can do the origins of like the Janus and magic
Mm-hmm.
and all that. I can explain why. One of the more recent things I did, and I'm really excited about this. This is ridiculous, I know, but a question that was posed to me years ago, I think by my wife actually. She said, "Why do the dragons bond with the riders?"
Mm.
And I was like, "What are you asking me that for? That's a silly question. That's a silly question. We have, we
Everybody
have,
knows
we
that
have
they do have to do that.
yeah,
They
they
just
do
do.
it. They just do it, and we love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like leave me alone."
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is like that question like hammered me for years, because I was like, I get why we would, bond with a dragon. That's all the benefits. But
Mm-hmm.
what do they get? Anyway, in book 4, I can't say because it really is a spoiler because the book's not
Mm-hmm.
even out yet. But I finally have this absolutely epic explanation as to why that bond occurs. And it's something I couldn't really have done in the Echo Saga or in a post Echo Saga. I have to
Mm.
go back to the beginning to
I
explain
see.
the mechanics of this world and why everything is the
Mm.
way it is. And there's like 12,000 years as well between these two sagas, um, because there was elements that I didn't want to step into that
Mm-hmm.
are explained. So Atalan, the war with that the
Yes.
Dragon War that Atalan started, and that's the whole. That was one of those big shifting, momentous blocks that meant that when you're reading the Echo Saga, that's why history is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like a pivoting point.
Yeah.
You've got those like 10,000 years that is sort of explained in the Echo Saga,
Yeah.
and then everything that's on the other side of Atalan is kind of like its own. It's like a branched, almost like history. It's
Mm-hmm.
completely. It doesn't really match up the two, and it's because Atalan changed everything and broke everything and was just overall a horrible bastard of a king.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but this has given me a chance to go back and show you why or how things were so different,
Mm-hmm.
but also explain why things the way they are in the Echo Saga.
Mm. I want to pause right there because I do want to talk to you about Time of Dragons, but I really wanted to ask you, just like as you've been writing these stories, have there been any, to your point, like people begging for more Ash, or and probably DMing you and tagging you in things and asking you all these questions in person online? Have there been any like very memorable reader experiences that you've had that you still think to like, oh, that was a cool interaction, or that one made me think, or this one made me like, very happy or very like interested? Like, have there been any that you could share, like that?
What of readers reaching out to
Mm-hmm.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the really, really meaningful ones are ones that I didn't expect, and I never wrote these books intending for them to impact people
Mm-hmm.
anything more than just popcorn entertainment. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to break the wheel here. I'm not trying to reinvent the genre, and I'm not trying to make people cry, and I'm not trying to
Mhm.
make people laugh. I'm just trying to write some escapism.
Mhm.
Um, but I've had some people reach out to me. I remember one really nice woman who she had lost her baby. She's had a miscarriage,
Mhm.
and she reached out and said, "Actually, I'm having a really hard time, but I'm reading the Echo Saga, and it's really helping me deal with my grief, and it's really helping me
Interesting.
work through grief and how these
Mhm.
characters are working through their grief and reflection and all that." Like I was just
Mhm.
really touched by that because that isn't something I intended for. I've had a fair few soldiers reach out as well, actually, that I completely didn't expect. American soldiers saying how it's helped with PTSD.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
I,
because your characters deal with a lot of that as well.
yeah, yeah. And again, when you're writing it, you don't think, oh, this will be really good for people going through this. Because
Mhm.
I don't think about the real world ever when I'm writing the books.
Mhm.
I never have like a political statement to make or
Mhm.
religious statement or anything like that. I don't bring in the real world
Mhm.
um, into the books. It's just complete fiction that I'm just coming up with. And I'm sure I am influenced by outside things, but I'd never put my opinions into the books.
Mhm.
Um, I think as soon as you do that, it kind of breaks the magic of it all,
Yeah.
because you want to feel like these characters are completely real.
Mhm.
And as soon as you feel like, oh, I'm not sure, that feels like it might be the author's opinion,
Yeah.
it breaks the magic of what the book is supposed to do. So I try and
Yeah.
stay away from all that. But it is lovely when people reach out and say things that it's really touched them in a way that I just did not
Mhm.
intend.
Do you ever fear that, like, hey, I'm writing this book, this next book that's coming out. What if it doesn't do as well as the ones before? Or are you like, do you have like a little bit, at least a foundational level of confidence of like, I'm confident that this is a good book, or like this is, or are you just like, you know what, fuck it. Some people might like it, some people might not. I don't know. It's out of my hands once it's in the reader's hands.
Yeah, fear. I think fear is a very real thing that you live with. I think that any creative or artist person has with their work.
Mm-hmm.
We're not writing textbooks here. This is complete. It's art in its own
Mm-hmm.
form, and like any art, it's subject to opinion, and everyone's opinion never stays the same either. I've noticed. Over the years, I've had people say, "Picked it up, put it down." Picked it up a year later, couldn't put it down.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to art, people's opinions change as they change.
Yeah.
People evolve, and you want new things and different things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I always live with like a fear that one, my readership that's followed me, that's a group of people that are going through their own lives and all their own stuff, and they're evolving
Mm-hmm.
in their own way. And so I live with the fear that um, they might change and not like what I'm writing anymore,
Yeah,
you know.
that's
And
fair.
then I live with the fear of like new people picking it up and just not enjoying it because it's just not for them, or you know, when you finish a book, I always think, I wonder what the one thing I've put in this book that's going to really piss someone off. Because you'll find that someone might love the book, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
sentence in there, a sentence that they don't like.
Yeah.
One star this book because of this one, these
Yeah.
10 words out of 250,000, these 10
Mm-hmm.
words have completely ruined the book. I'll read the next one, but one star. So I
Mm.
always wonder what that's going to be when I finish it. Um, but yeah, you always, I think every author fears that, the the book that they're about to release isn't going to go down well, especially when you're writing a series,
Yeah.
because you're committed to writing the next one. And so if things do this, you're like, well, I can't just put the book, that whole series down. I have to show
Mm-hmm.
people that I can finish what I start. So you have to do the next
Mm-hmm.
one. And then, of course,
Yeah.
there's the fear of writing the last book where it has to tie everything up. It has to be
Mm-hmm.
satisfying. It has to hit all those notes. It has to be
Yeah.
sweet and bitter, and it has to have everything in there that you're
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously looking for. And like you say, there's things in there that you didn't want to happen, but on reflection, you're like, it makes the story stronger that it did happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the initial reaction that people have isn't always, the initial reaction is, I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
1 star.
Yeah. I mean, that's always so tough for me when I'm reading books and I'm like, why did you do this? Why did you do this? Why did you do this? And I've really had like I don't really give 1 star things like that anymore. I don't no, actually never did. But I don't really do like star reviews as much anymore. But I always had to like before I talk about a book or post anything, I'm thinking like I need to give myself at least half a day break between finishing the book and then talking
Yeah,
about the book, knowing
yeah,
full well that at the end of the book my emotions are at such a high, whether it's high anger, high frustration, high happiness, high joy, high satisfaction, high entertainment, whatever it is. And then I come down and I'm like, okay, now that all those emotions are gone, how did I actually feel about the book? Not the ending, which is what gave me those like heightened emotions. And then I come to find, okay, I can rationalize why they did that. That makes sense. Oh, that was really good. Oh, that was actually,
yeah.
I actually did enjoy that. I felt bad about it, but I think it actually makes sense. That
That's
kind of stuff.
why it's so important that you give as much life to your characters as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, if they're completely fleshed out and they feel completely real,
Mm-hmm.
then they are also completely flawed.
Yeah.
Which means that when they make stupid decisions, as long as you can um, you can look back at that character's journey, at their experiences, as long as you've got it on board, the history that has been unpacked
Mm-hmm.
for this character, then if they make a stupid decision, at least you can go, I can see why they did that.
Yeah.
It might not be what you would have done, but you can
Mm-hmm.
see why they did it. As long as you can
Yes.
rationalize why they made that stupid decision, it still feels organic. It still feels like it was what would have should have happened, what would have
Mm-hmm.
happened, and then you can accept it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have smart, witty, strong, intelligent characters that have nothing but a history of always like doing the right thing
Mm-hmm.
at the right moment, and then they make a stupid decision that means that X, Y, and Z now happen. The story now expands in new
Yeah.
ways. That's when you go, oh, that's the author just dipping his finger in and
Mm-hmm.
making it go in the way that they want it to go because they want to write about this later on.
Yes.
As soon as that happens, it breaks that magic of the book.
Mm-hmm.
You need your
Yeah.
characters to feel completely real, and that means
Mm-hmm.
that my job is making sure that when they make their decisions, you
Mm-hmm.
follow through with the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Because as
Yeah.
soon as you start ignoring the consequences, it becomes very clear that actually you're just protecting these characters and moving them through.
Right. Well,
Um,
I just finished a book today. It was another Ranger book. That's I didn't necessarily have high or low hopes for it. I was just kind of going in blind, and as I was reading it, it was relatively short, like 300-400 pages, but it just everything felt so flat. And while I was reading it, I was like, yeah, I'm not getting any time with these characters. I don't feel like they're
mm,
being fleshed out. I don't feel like they're being like really talked about. So when they make decisions, when they do things, I'm like, okay, cool. You're trying to push this story along to get to the end and do this whole like fast pacing thing, but I have no time with these people. And what I really liked about your story and what I loved about um, other stories that I've read, Ranger's Apprentice, is you actually, even though they're longer series, right? 9 books, Ranger's Apprentice was 12 books. You get time with these characters, as episodic of those books are, as like as like 3 books segmented like sections as these books are. Like you get time with these characters. Like you don't remove my time with the character to push the plot along, right? And I
yeah,
appreciate that because now that I've read a few books that have done that, I'm like, wow, I feel so like weird. Like I should be enjoying this because it's a genre that I like and it's a theme that I like and it's like a
yeah,
plot point that should be interesting, but everything just feels flat because there's just no depth. And there's something to be said that like you can make depth in 300, 400 pages. You can make depth in 700 pages, add more words, but um,
yeah,
that depth is very important for
yeah.
sure in terms
That's
of
what
connecting
that's
the
what
reader to the
you
book.
that's what you sink into. Is the
Yeah.
characters, the plot. The plot is very important, but the characters is what draws you in. because they're the
Mm-hmm.
ones who are giving you the motivation, whether it's the protagonist or antagonist. They're the ones pushing the ball, and they're the ones that are making you come back for more.
Yeah.
That's why people wanted more Asher. Like it was him, it was his character no one really cared what he was going to do. They just
Agreed.
wanted to see him continue. They just wanted
Mm-hmm.
more of his personality on the page.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And sticking on this idea of Asher, I did want to ask you, given how many stories you've read, books you've written, what makes the ideal ranger, in your opinion?
I mean, for me, blended, um, I blended Aragorn, John Wick, and Daredevil.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So I
because you gave
blended.
him martial arts fighting and marksman and close combat and being blinded rather.
Well, it was also like the moral code of all those characters as well. The 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 heart of them.
Mm,
In that they can all do. They're all maybe not so much Aragorn. Aragorn was very much the really good and honourable side of Asher,
mm-hmm.
but there are shades of really deep shades of grey with
Mm-hmm.
Matt Murdock as Daredevil and
Mm-hmm.
John Wick. These men who all have a skill set and a history,
Mm-hmm.
and they've all got a past that makes them they're not completely on the right side of good or evil. They're sort of
Mm-hmm.
walking that line. And you mean, yeah, I probably drew Aragorn in because he's the archetype. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I
The
gave him a
OG.
gr- I gave him the green cloak because I loved Dritz Do'Urden from the Salvatore books. So
Mm-hmm.
I gave him the green cloak as like my homage to
Mm-hmm.
those books. Um, and I just wanted. I think for me, the ideal ranger is someone that's more good than bad,
Mm-hmm.
but they're often a bit jaded, older characters. They've seen a lot. Like
Right.
Aragorn is like 80.
Right.
And Keanu Reeves is I think in his 50s. Like these, I prefer the older character that has
Yeah.
baggage and experience and is a bit jaded and but still has life in them, still has a journey to be had, still has a story arc to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they're older, it doesn't mean that that's like the end. They don't.
Yeah.
Not every character has to be 18 or 20 years old and
Mm-hmm.
is finding themselves. Like I have
Mm-hmm.
those characters. I have Gideon. He's that
Yes.
character. In Time of Dragons, I've got Joran because we still love those archetypes and we still love those tropes, and I enjoy them as well. But I always like to balance them with older, jaded characters,
Yeah.
and I think for me that's where your ranger type sits.
Mm-hmm.
Often, they don't say much. The less they say, the more
Mm-hmm.
impact they have.
Yeah. I think of the ranger type as those like brooding, uh, colder, calculating individuals. To your point, where they're in the back of the room, like Asher's gonna walk into an inn, maybe go into the corner, put his back in the corner, put his cowl up, and just watch and see and
Yeah.
like observe. Right? They're very observant, things like that. Um,
I mean, what drives a man to exile himself from civilization, never get
mm-hmm.
roots, to roam the world, and then on top of that, constantly challenge a monster of some kind?
Mm-hmm.
Like what drives a man to do that? For me, Asher was a character who was simultaneously chasing something and running away from something.
Mm-hmm.
That was where I wanted to keep him at all times.
Yeah.
Like he was always hunting something and he was always being hunted.
Mm-hmm.
As long as he sat between those two, it felt like he was never standing still. He was always on the move, and that feeds into his. I think he even says that at some point that like as soon as he stands still, he's dead. He has to
Yeah.
keep moving.
Yeah. Some might say he's a shark. Who knows? Um,
Yeah.
moving on, moving forward or backwards, depending on how you look at it. Time of Dragons, right? And so you kind of talked about why you decided to make it and everything. And I wanted to ask, kind of where do you see yourself going with it? Like you're about to release book 4, out of 5. do you see yourself staying in Verda, or do you see yourself like, I think I'm told the stories I want to tell of this world. Let me go make a new world.
I think, well, to be honest, in my head, the Echo Saga was the full stop on
Mm-hmm.
the Verda universe.
Mm.
I didn't intend to go beyond it time wise, um, and in terms of going backwards and doing the archives and doing Time of Dragons, I thought it was kind of like a beginning and an end,
Mm-hmm.
and also going back to the fear element. A
Yeah.
part of me is afraid
Yeah.
to leave Verda and delve into other stories and other worlds
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, this is my job. I'm a full time writer.
Mm-hmm.
I need to sell books to live to feed my kids. Um, and Verda is a very popular world. It's the
Mm-hmm.
world that I know really inside out, and I'm also really enjoying learning more about it myself and finding
Mm-hmm.
new corners to like spread into and new parts of its history and stuff. So I am a little bit fearful of moving away from Verda.
Yeah.
Um, in some ways, I probably never will.
Mm-hmm.
In that, even if I do write something else, there's probably always going to be a Verda story working its way in the back of my head, and I'll
Yeah.
probably kick out another story here or there. Like I've still got a couple of Asher novellas that I want to write,
Mm-hmm.
which will be post Echoes, and I'll probably collate all of his novellas into like one omnibus edition
Mm-hmm.
at some point down the line. And I still have a dream of writing this kind of like Avengers Endgame trilogy that would take place after the Echo Saga, and it will fold in all of the books,
Mm-hmm.
into one big thing. But
Mm-hmm.
again, the problem I have there is that I'll probably then get a lot of readers not knowing where to begin.
Right.
Already readers are sort of asking me where do I begin, and I'm always saying you can
Right.
start anywhere. Doesn't matter which book you begin with, which series you begin with. They all just feed into each other. They all have their
Mm-hmm.
own stories to tell. They don't spoil each other. But then writing this endgame style trilogy would really require all of my readers to have read the backlog, which is asking
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't have this concrete plan as of yet for where I
Mm-hmm.
go next in Verda. I have started writing my own version of a King Arthur book,
Mm-hmm.
which I've started giving bits to my Patreon, and it's it's something. It's my take on King Arthur. So it's kind of like imagine King Arthur, but in the style of the Echo Saga.
Yeah.
Um, so that's something I'm probably going to pick up at speed once I get book 5 under my belt, and that's done.
Mm.
So it might be that for a couple of years there's just like this sort of King Arthur trilogy that comes out, and
Yeah.
then I'll come back to Verda and do another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's hard for me to say right now exactly what the future holds for
Mm-hmm.
like the next series.
Yeah.
Um, I just know that I have this King Arthur story in my head, and I know that Time of Dragons is coming to an end, and I'm not going to go any further back than a Time of Dragons. Time of
Imagine. So how was this planet created?
Yes,
You're just like,
exactly.
what is happening?
It
Where are we
becomes
going now?
science fiction if I go
Right.
any further back. So
Right.
the Time of Dragons is where it's at. I probably will end up doing some post Echo Saga stories. I might even do some, like one-off books that are just
Mm-hmm.
dotted throughout history here and there.
Yeah.
I don't feel finished with Asher, um, and I know that the readers aren't either. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably going to be more of him. Gideon says in book 9, one of his last things that he says to Vigon and Inara is, the only thing he's sure of is that a time of dragons will come again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the line that he
Yeah.
delivers. Um, and so part of me is, I don't want to get into spoiler territory in a time of dragons, but a part of me does feel like, I wonder if it all ties into something post echoes that kind of fulfills all of these visions, prophecies,
Mm-hmm.
statements. So
Yeah.
it might go there. It might go post echoes into something new and
Mm.
wonderful. We'll have to see.
Mm. I was going to say that, like, so because I read all 9 of these books within the span of 2 months, I feel like I really very rapidly ran through an entire country and a world in 2 months. And so it almost felt like, okay, cool. After book 9, I need to like go to other worlds and then come back because I'm somebody who when I read, I'm like, I feel like I've spent a bit too long in this world. I need to go to somewhere else and then I need to come back. And so
Yeah.
that's why I didn't read any of any Quaintrell verse in 2025. And so now in 2026, I'm like, okay, cool. I remember enough of Echo Saga about your writing and your style of writing, things like that, and the events to be like, okay, cool. I think I can go back into Rangers Archives or go back to Time of Dragons and feel like this feels fresh again. This feels new again. This feels like something exciting again. Versus I felt like, okay, I just finished these 9 books. Okay, old man, let me strap on the reading spectacles and go back to Rangers Archives and things like that. It would have been like forcing myself. But I did want to say I have been looking forward to like anytime you release something, I'm like, oh, is it a new book? It is, but it's Verda. Not because I don't like Verda, because I'm also like, okay, I really do enjoy your writing
Yeah.
so much. Your character
Oh,
development, your
thank you.
storylining, your plot, your like the way you write, the prose, everything. And so I was like, I also want you in a different world as well.
Yeah.
That's also what I want. And so if that ever comes, like even sticking with fantasy, but the King Arthur story, like you said that, I said, where's my wallet? It's right here. My credit card's right here. Because I can just imagine that that's going to be also really cool. Um, and so I'm going to go back into Verda, but I'm also very looking forward to seeing you in new places as well, because I think
Thanks.
that's also where, for your readers, like, oh, I really liked his world, but I realized maybe I also really like his writing and I really like him as an author, right? You have those kind of authors where this series was really good, but this one didn't hit me as much. So maybe I liked the world and the series and stuff that they did here, but not the other one, and they
Yeah.
are written the same way. But for me, it's like a lot of the times if I read authors, it's because I really like how they write, right? And I've been like this for a while where if I'm drawing a tangent to podcast, which is really weird tangent, and hear me out, a lot of the times you listen to podcasts for the topic and the guest,
Yeah.
but I listen to podcasts for the actual speakers, like this person I
Yeah.
want to listen to this,
Yeah.
and they could talk about 3 or 4 or 5 different topics, and I want to listen to the person,
Yeah.
right?
You enjoy the way they dig into a topic as opposed to the
Exactly, and
person explaining the topic.
that's kind of how I've tried to make whatever the content that I make do, is I'm trying to show like this is how I want to present it. I know that it could be presented better, or this topic could be presented differently, or whatever it is, right? But here's the topic,
Yeah.
but here's how I want to talk about it. And I think that's because I enjoy that from other people. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing you um, somewhere else as well. That being
Me too.
said, on
Yeah.
my yeah, and I'm sure at some point you're like, okay, I do want to go flex my fingers or something else. Like it's like I've been training in Taekwondo for 10 years. Can I go do a little bit of like jujitsu also? Like, can I
Yeah.
explore something else? I'm gonna dig
I mean, I
into.
would. It's a dream to write as well in other people's worlds. I'd love
Mm,
to. I'd love to write a Star Wars book. Or you know, or even a James Bond book. Like
yeah.
I'd love to write in a franchise or something that I've grown up with that I love. I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
like lend my prose to some other world,
Mm-hmm.
which may well happen. That might still be in the future. Um,
Fan fiction writers are some of the most addictive writers. Apparently, I never grew up reading fan fiction, but somehow a lot of my friends did. And so I'll talk to people and they're like, "Have you read this? Have you read that?" I'm like, "Bro, I just read books that were in the library. I didn't know fan fiction was a thing."
yeah,
But
it's
then you see
huge.
people who like write into other people's worlds and their own stories, and I'm like, I'm a bit like put off. I
I
don't know
can
why.
tell you, it's weird. It's really weird when someone sends you fan fiction on your world. Like people have
Really?
sent me fan fiction that they've written, and it's so weird reading about Asher but someone else is putting the
Mm-hmm.
words in his mouth and describing the way he moves and the way he's
Mm-hmm.
thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever I read the fan fiction stuff, I'm always like, oh, it's really weird. It's just so odd. It's very flattering, but also you're always like, no, he wouldn't say that. Or he wouldn't do it like
Yeah. Well, I was gonna
that.
ask you. Do you read it and you're like, nah, he wouldn't. They would. Nice try, guys.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there's
yeah.
something else going on here. I like that. I enjoy that you can kind of you have a fan base that you can kind of like give a little back and forth with. I do appreciate. I think because you've been I'm if I'm not mistaken self-published this entire time, and so like
No.
what I realize about self-published authors is they do invite their fan base in, I feel like, a little bit
Yeah.
more because there isn't that barrier of a publisher or whatever it is,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah. I mean,
so,
a publisher wants to safeguard their author. They want to,
mm-hmm,
yeah, they want to make sure that they're protected
mm-hmm,
on all sides from different things. They expose them to like great things as well, sending them to panels and cons and
yep,
stuff like that. But they also want to make sure that they are protected. You can't just reach out
mm-hmm,
and make sure, if someone sends me a direct message, I'm gonna get it.
yeah,
I'll see it on my phone, kind of thing. You can't do the same thing for George R. R. Martin.
right,
Um, and so yeah, as an indie, you are more connected to your
mm-hmm,
audience. We're just like right there, kind of thing.
yeah,
Which has been especially in the beginning, that was incredible because
mm-hmm,
you feel so vulnerable and you
yeah,
feel completely unsure about whether this thing you're doing is working. Even if you can see the money coming in and people are
mm-hmm,
buying the books, you still have this sense of imposter syndrome.
mm-hmm,
And so having that initial wave of readers turn up and just be like, this was so fresh. I love this.
yeah,
Please tell me you're going to keep writing. And also, you need that as well to help you go full time.
mm-hmm,
Otherwise, it'll take, I've released like 21 books in the last 10 years. Couldn't have done that if I wasn't full time.
yeah,
It's just not possible. So having those readers show up every time, those loyal readers that are just like, like you say, like, here's my money. They're just like, what if you've written it, I'll buy it.
mm-hmm,
That kind of thing keeps the dream alive. That
yeah,
helps me to keep coming up and dreaming up new ideas, new books, new characters, new storylines.
mm-hmm,
Um, and also, there is no, there is no, you said before we went on, you were a bit like starstruck meeting me and stuff like that. I've heard that before, but also it's sort of in my head that's really, it jars with me because I'm like, no, I'm a reader as well.
mm-hmm,
The thing that binds us all is that actually we love fantasy books.
right,
And yeah, I've written one, a few, and and you've read them. That's like a
mm-hmm,
slightly different situation, but ultimately, the thing is, we both just love reading fantasy books.
yeah,
We both love just geeking out and talking about these different worlds and storylines and
mm-hmm,
characters doing cool shit.
I
It's
agree,
lovely that all these people reach out, but I'm just like, we're all the same. We're all the same. We all just love fantasy books, and it just happens to be that I managed to find one locked away in here,
mm-hmm,
and I found a way to get it out.
yeah,
Again, the self-publishing route really saved me. I was a nurse before I started doing this,
mm-hmm,
and I enjoyed the job. I enjoyed what I did, and it felt very fulfilling.
mm-hmm,
But it was also grueling.
mm-hmm,
Nursing is hard. It's not a lot of pay for a lot of work,
mm-hmm,
um, and it's a lot of hours, really bad hours.
yeah,
That you feel older every time you do a shift. Um, and this self-publishing route saved me from all of that.
mm-hmm,
I said to my wife, when we have kids, I can't be doing this job. I don't know how I'm going to see you guys.
yeah,
And it was a real blessing that I was able to go full time just a year before our son was born. So my kids have never known me as a nurse.
mm-hmm,
It's amazing that I'm able to do this full time, and that's because of the readers that keep showing up, and
yeah.
the fact that self-publishing even exists
That's very
is
true.
amazing.
Like,
Yeah, it's great.
like to me, self-publishing is the parallel to just like creating content as a person who, like, you're not a celebrity, you're not a movie actor, you're not a, not a specific like a businessman who has their own company and they're just making money on the side. Like you're creating content for somebody else to directly consume, and you're getting a benefit out of like their consumption. And in your way, like you're making a book to go straight to somebody else. It's not
Yeah,
going from you to your publisher to then somebody else to then the marketer, and like all of it is just straight you and the person, right?
yeah,
And so there's this
and don't
like
get me
direct
wrong, you know,
level.
self-publishing, it's an ocean of content,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it is people just writing stuff and getting it out there, or worse, using AI to
Mm-hmm.
write stuff and get it out there. But there is, you know, at the surface, there is this, you know, a vast group of people who are using the same editors as the big
Mm-hmm.
publishing houses, using the same illustrators as the big publishing
Mm-hmm.
houses. They're using beta readers and ARC readers. They're having their books vetted
Yeah.
before they go out. You know, they're saving their money over months or years to pay for the editors and the illustrators,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can make the best product. It's like making any product that you'd sell on eBay or something. You know, you're
Yeah.
making this product at home and you're investing your own money into it, and then you put it out there, and you just hope that someone picks it up. You know, I didn't
Yeah.
tell a soul when I published Rise of the Ranger. Didn't tell anyone. And
Interesting.
I'd still love to know, and obviously I never will, but I would love to know who those first 4 Americans were that bought it in its first 6 hours of life. Because I
Mm-hmm.
published it at like 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
and I checked back in on it just after midnight. And in those 6 hours, it sold 4 books in America. I'd love to know who they were.
We
Um,
have this on recording. I promise you this clip is going out. We're collaborating. You're putting it on your thing. We're gonna find, hey, you. What year was it? What year was it again?
I mean, you could find out because it came out. Oh, what was it now? I think it was May the 4th, 2017.
You
And
on May 4th, 2017, between the hours of 6 p.m. and 12 p.m. in whatever American
GMT.
time zone you were in. Um, if you're the person who bought Rise of the Ranger, one of the first four people, comment. Let us know, because
I want
that's
to know who
that
you are.
exact. You know, I do think about that a lot. Of like, um, you know, when you first start creating content, you're making YouTube videos, making a podcast, you're making stories, whatever it is. You're like the first few people who actually do leave a comment on a video, the
Yeah,
first few people who hit the follow button,
yeah,
the
yeah.
first person, if you're a streamer, who subscribes, the first person to ever give you money for something consistently that you're trying to do, right? I feel like they really do oftentimes hold a special place, like in the heart over everybody
Mm,
else who does amazing things as well. It's like the
yeah,
first people to do
absolutely.
something. Like you're the reason why I'm still doing it,
Yeah, those
right?
first 4 people bought that book with no reviews.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't have a Chris McGrath cover. It had a different cover on it. You know, a
Mm-hmm.
completely different one. Um, it had, it wasn't even formatted well. It was a Word document. I didn't know what I was doing back then. It was
Mm-hmm.
just a Word document. Didn't have a map. There was no map. No map existed.
Yeah.
Um, it had nothing going for it. But those 4 people bought it in its first 6 hours of life, and it snowballed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was incredible.
Amazing. Amazing.
Incredible. Yeah.
Wow. This was a really good conversation. I appreciate it. I like I said, you know, like we said, coming into this, I was a bit starstruck because I do try and keep a line between me and somebody that I'm like a creator or like a somebody that I'm whose work that I'm consuming, only because I don't know, right, like where the
Sure.
line is. Like you could be somebody who makes content or writes books, but wants to keep like a line between them and the reader, just things like that, right? But you know, guys, when I reached out um, to Philip to call on the podcast, immediate response, literally immediate response. I also didn't know what time zone he was in. I didn't know what the time difference was. It's like 5 hours. We're fine, but immediate response. And so I was like, wow, this guy's cool. This guy's actually really down. He's awesome. And talking with you today, it did feel just like a conversation. It didn't feel like, oh, you know, I'm talking to somebody who's like out of reach or like above me in any way. And I appreciate the comfortability and the casualness that you brought to the conversation, it made it very meaningful for me. That was the goal. After
Good.
this, I'm probably going to go and make 9 to 10 designs in my Fableware style, and just because I want to have them. I make shirts off of books, and that's just because I love to. I love, like, I made this because I didn't like shirts that I used to buy. I was like, nobody sells what I want, and so I just started making the designs. And recently, I've been making designs based on books that I really enjoy. Um,
Great.
and so I think I'm going to make these designs just to have, and I'm going to put them on a shirt. I'm going to wear it, and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to wear that shirt when I read the rest of the books for Rangers Archives and for Time of Dragons. Um,
And
Philip,
whatever
where
comes
are
next.
and whatever comes next, honestly. Where are you going next? What's next for you?
Um, I've got a big year ahead of me. Um, you know, so as of when this goes out, um, it will have already been announced. But I've signed a deal with the Broken Binding. They are publishing A Time of Dragons worldwide in English, paperback, hardback, special edition, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, it's one of those dreams
Mm-hmm.
that I put to bed a long time ago. Being in bookshops and airports and all that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Just like dispersed. I put that to bed a long time ago and accepted the fact that I'm an indie. Getting into bookshops is extremely difficult. You're competing with
Mm-hmm.
the big publishing houses that have all those slots. And I was happy with that. I'm making a living and I'm enjoying my life, and I get to see my kids so much, which is great. But this deal is a hybrid deal. Which again, hybrid deals don't come along every day.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're amazing at the Broken Banner. Allowing me to keep my ebooks and audio, which any indie will tell you that's your bread and butter. That's where you're making most of your money from.
Mm-hmm.
Is amazing, and they're going to now take the paperbacks and the hardbacks and deliver it to a whole new audience that
Mm-hmm.
that don't ever buy the ebooks or the audio. They just buy their books from the shops. So yeah, I'm really excited, and with that comes lots of there's events and things going on. There's book signings and stuff, and
Right.
there's I'll be coming to America next year and doing a book tour, which will be my first book tour. I've been a bit of a hermit
Mm-hmm.
by choice. I've
Yeah,
sort of
I mean, to
decided,
knock out 21 books in 10 years, you kind of have to just like lock in, stay inside, just crank out words.
yeah,
And I was going
yeah,
to ask you if there were events and things that you were going to be doing this year or later. So if you're coming to the US next year, that's exciting, because
yeah,
what are the chances of, I don't know, a 5'10" Indian man, black hair, beard, wears glasses, who comes in with 9 books to your table and says, I need all of these signed right now. Everybody else stop. I need all 9 of these. That's exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
yes. So am I. I'm really, really, really excited. And it's great because we've been discussing it for a year, lots of back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
and getting it all negotiated and straightened out. So it's been a real like year of just, is this going to work? Is it going to happen?
Yeah.
But the contract is now signed. It's
Yeah.
it's amazing, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to just what comes of this, and what new avenues it brings,
Mm-hmm.
new ways I can explore. So it's one of those things. Like I said, it's a dream I put to bed, and the things these books keep doing is surprising me.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking I'm done, and then the books
Yeah.
open a new door that I didn't think I'd have access to. Um,
You mind if I ask a bit of a clarifying question on, like, because I have a limited knowledge right now of publishing, but I wanted to ask, why Time of Dragons and not like Echo Saga in that
yeah,
sense? Like,
yeah.
what's the difference there?
So on a very practical level, publishing a 9 book series into bookstores is very hard.
Mm,
Um, you will find, you won't find. So take the Dritz books, for example, the R.A. Salvatore books. You just won't find all of them in a bookstore. They just won't
mm-hmm.
stock them all. They'll stock the first few and then maybe the most current one.
Mm-hmm.
A 5 book series, though, if it's successful, you could potentially get all 5 books into the store.
I see.
With the 9, that you'd probably go into Barnes and Noble and find 1, 2, and 3,
Right.
uh, and then you'd have to order the rest,
Mm-hmm.
or
See.
whatever the most recent one that we've released is. So
Right.
it's just practically it's tricky because those 9 spots on the bookshelf in a bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
they're expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, and then storing them as well, storing all 9 books. The bookshop's got to have somewhere to store them, all the
Yeah.
extra ones and stuff. So on a practical level, a big series isn't impossible. It's just tricky.
Yeah.
But then on a not a practical note, while we were talking about it, we were like, actually, this whole discussion of where do you begin? We kind of said, well, actually, there's no debating with the Time of Dragons. It's
Mm-hmm.
chronologically first.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people who have read Echoes, then Archives, then Time of Dragons, or Archives, then Echoes, then Time of Dragons. They would say, oh no, the order I've read it in is the best.
Yeah.
Reading Echo Saga first is like the real introduction to the world. Uh, and I like the fact that people who have read it the other way around say, no, you should read A Time of Dragons first.
Yeah.
I think that the what I'm getting back from readers who have read it in the different orders, the feedback generally is you can start anywhere and you
Mm-hmm.
will feel like you've started in the right place.
Mm.
That's what I wanted. I was worried
Interesting.
myself that people would be like, yeah, it's a good series, I enjoy it, but you do need to read all 9 books of the Echo Saga before you can pick it up. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
actually, yeah, the feedback I've had is the opposite. It's that you can start there and
Yeah.
read that afterwards, and it feels right.
Yeah.
So we thought from a mass market point of view, if we do start at day dot, the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, then there is no debate. You can just start there, um, and you can move through the rest of the series in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
But not that you have to. You don't have to. It's just that was the decision. We were like, we can get 5 books into stores. It's the first series in the world of
Yeah.
Verda. So let's go
Interesting.
there.
Okay. That makes sense. Wow. So exciting. Wow. Okay, cool. That's just awesome. I love seeing I've learned of a few that have started in indie and then gone a couple of their books have been published. So they're like the hybrid method, which to your point, um, is tricky. But I think that's cool. I think the option there is cool that now that some publishers, I guess, however limited, are offering that. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the announcement and all the events that are coming up. New book releasing in the summer. Um, you want a flight to the U.S. next year? I don't care where I am. I will be in the Northeast or in the South in Texas. I'll either be in Pennsylvania or in Texas, and wherever I
Well,
am,
so at the point that you'll have released this, I'm going to San Diego and Dallas in March. Um, because it's March. As we're recording this, it's March. But I'm going
mm,
to Ryan Carhill's because Broken Bindings just launched his book.
yes,
So I'm going to his San Diego event to do some signings and chat with
mm,
him. San Diego and Dallas on I think it's the 13th and 14th of March.
I'm gonna be in Dallas on the 2nd and 3rd of March. No, I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm gonna lose
Yeah.
my mind.
So I'm
Okay.
there. I'm there in March, and then I'm planning on going to Worldcon in Anaheim
Mm-hmm.
in August,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to Dragonsteel in Utah in December.
I was thinking of one of the ones to go to this year because I keep like since I've come into the space of creating book content, I was very much an outsider. So I didn't know about book conventions. I didn't know about signings. I didn't really do a lot of that stuff. And so just last year, people were like, this convention's going on, this convention's going on, this convention's going on. I'm
There's
like, where did these
loads.
come from first place?
Yeah,
And then I always learned about them when I couldn't go. And even
yeah.
right now, there's one happening in New York in April or in DC in June. And I'm like, the tickets are already sold out. And I learned about them just a couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm very much looking forward to. I think I want to go to Dragon Con this year. I think a
I went
lot
to
of people.
Dragon Con last year.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was
It
great.
looked really fun
It's really fun. It's very
based on all the
big.
videos.
Like Worldcon is like books.
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Con is like everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a much like bigger event over a
Mm-hmm.
bigger space. Um, but for me, my only problem is it's one after the other this year. So it's like
Yeah.
Worldcon and then DragonCon. It's just too long. It's just too long to be away for me. So
Yeah.
I'll just do Worldcon, I think.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Awesome. Philip, thank you once again for joining me today. I loved having
It's
you
been a
on.
pleasure.
Two more questions before I let you go. The first thing is, where can people find you if they want to keep up with what you're doing?
I'm very active on Instagram. Yeah, follow me on there, and you can message me on there. You can also find me on Facebook, and if you go to my website, phillipcquaintrell.com, that has all the links and connections to all the books, some of the history of Verda and stuff like that, but also like all my social media. Like it's just a good hub to go to, and you
Mm-hmm.
can also sign up to my mailing list on my website. I don't spam or anything like that. It's just updates. I've also got Patreon as well, where I'm feeding like new raw chapters and unseen artwork and stuff like that. We've got some really cool artwork that's going out there. So yeah,
Exciting.
any
Are there any
any of
special
those
editions in
places.
the future for us?
Yes, I mean, Time of Dragons Book 3, the Endless Edition for that is should already be out. It might be out actually by the time this is gone out there, but as of right now, there was a misprint, so
Hmm.
they're having to do that again,
Gotcha.
unfortunately.
Okay.
And then, of course, we've got the Echo Saga box set. Have you seen that? That's coming out. Did you
Yeah.
see? Yeah, we've got Renee's artwork. We've got the dragon on one side, and then you turn it around.
Yes.
It's got the map across the
Ah,
edges.
yeah.
We've got that
I'm.
coming out at some point. We've released the first three. They're just being printed as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll do the next three and then the last three. Hopefully, we'll get them all out this year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm really excited to get that out. That's really cool. And then there is some more special stuff, but I can't
Yeah.
say yet.
Yeah.
But
We'll
that it
we'll
will
keep
be
some
announced
things
soon.
tight-lipped and have people look forward to them. The last thing I wanted to ask you is, this is a question I ask every guest that comes on the podcast. It's an intentionally vague question, but so hopefully your brain juices are churning. But for somebody listening today, they've listened through this entire hour and 12 minutes that we've been talking. What is one piece of advice that you can give to somebody who's listening today? Anything, anything goes. But what's one thing that you want to tell somebody listening today?
I think I have no business giving anyone advice on anything other than writing because that's the thing that I do. Um, and even then, I am making this up as I go writing. But my advice for anyone who wants to write, um, is to do what I did to begin with, which is to sit down and don't think about what other people are going to think about what you're writing. Uh, just write whatever the first thing is that comes to your head. People sometimes get in knots about where to start a book. Don't think about that. That will iron itself out as you write. You just need to write. So if you have a
Mm-hmm.
scene in your head and you wanna get it out, don't think about what came before that scene. Just write the scene. Start figuring out what your prose sounds like, what your characters feel like. Start writing it, get it down, and then just let your imagination work as to whether there's something before it, what comes next. Doesn't really matter. You just have to get that scene down.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get yourself tied up in knots about where to start or who's going to read it. To begin with, you just need to write. And if you love it, it is the most addictive thing. You can't stop. I write 10,000 words a week. Nothing stops me from doing that.
Some people get runner's high, some people get writer's high. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I'm neither. But lovely. That was lovely, lovely advice. Philip, once again, thank you for coming on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure.